Welcome to the first ever edition of the almost 30-minute quiz show. In this week's pod,
Getting niche in France with Donald and Emmanuel.
what's a good age difference between lovers?
Why falafels dabble with healthy vegetables has put some out of joint.
The answers coming up in today's The Almost 30-Minute Quiz Show. Hi there, and welcome to, as we said, our first ever podcast. I mean, it's not exactly true because Mark, who's my co-presenter, and I'm David, we did do a soccer football podcast for, what, a year or two?
I think it was 2 years.
Right.
But we were actually doing separate shows and then merged together due to financial difficulties.
Because our salaries were so high.
But when we got together, it was a really fun show. But we've known each other a lot longer than that.
We have. So, Mark, tell everybody a little bit about yourself.
So, my name's Mark. I'm an accountant. Please don't switch off. I'm now more of a civil servant, and I deal with property. Please don't switch off. But I love quizzes. I write quizzes in my spare time. I'm a bit of a quiz master. As we said earlier, I'm into football, and I spend a lot of time chatting about football, watching football, traveling the world to see football.
Tell us about the gambling machine that you used to rob on a regular basis as a student.
Yeah, one of the reasons I like quizzes is I used to have an encyclopedic memory of just about everything. Now that I've just hit 50, I can't remember how old I am. But in those good old days...
Oh gosh, happy birthday.
Thank you.
50 when? On Wednesday?
See, I can't even remember.
Wednesday last week.
It was Wednesday. I had a party Thursday, and then I'm going to see the doctor next week to get a rubber glove.
Are you having it?
Well, I've been waiting 10 years for it.
Excellent.
Ever since I heard that I could have it done.
I have to tell you, the sleep that I got when I had my first colonoscopy, I've only had one actually, the 20 minutes was the best sleep I've ever had during the day. I woke up so fresh.
I thought it was just a glove and a finger.
It is, well, I've no idea.
But do you get...
What happens is...
Do you get sedated?
Yeah, I did.
Brilliant.
You can request... I was out like a light.
I'm not sure I want to miss it.
You can ask to stay awake. What they do is you go in, you're wearing a gown. They tell you to roll onto your side with your one leg sort of crossing over the other so that it's opening your anal passage. And then they inject you with something. And then you wake up and you've been anally raped, or you have absolutely no idea what's gone on.
I was going to just say, I've had the one where they shove it down your throat.
As you can tell.
Do you think we should do... David, tell people about yourself. It's just downhill from here.
This is so much better than our first attempt to record the intro.
Yeah, we never mentioned being anally raped.
We shouldn't laugh about such things. I'm David. I'm a journalist, and I'm into the Middle East. I do not have an incredible memory like Mark. In fact, mine is rapidly going downhill.
I forgot to talk about the quiz machine. That's how good my memory was.
So anyway, you used to win lots of money on the quiz machine.
Show.
We'll talk about that anon. Anyway, what we're going to do over the next 25 minutes or so is pose a series of questions, which is what we'll do each week. And they're going to be something to do with the news of the week or something that's trending. And then for the rest of the programme, after we've posed the questions for you, we'll be talking about them in this kind of witty repartee.
Banter
between the two of us. But we would also always appreciate your comments, suggestions, keep them clean, although we might not keep the pod too clean. And you can do that by emailing us at almost30quiz@gmail.com. That's all written out as words, almost30quiz@gmail.com. So let's have a look at the questions we're going to be taking on in this week's pod.
So if you're listening, if you're out there in listener land, go and grab a pen and paper. We're going to do 6 questions, write the answers down, and then once we've gone through all of them, we will give you the answers and a bit of analysis.
So what you might want to do is hit the pause button between each question, so you can do that, write them down, because we're just going to sort of run through them, so those people who aren't stopping don't get bored.
Or make a pause now, get a cup of tea.
That's true.
Put your feet up,
or
get your slippers on.
Or hit the delete button now.
Well,
the first 3 minutes.
If you hadn't deleted after I said accountant or anally raped. Okay, let's start with question 1. Question 1. Which territory voted to leave the European Union in 1982?
I thought we said we're doing stuff that's relevant to this week.
Well,
1982. It is.
it
It is highly relevant. We'll get there soon. What is the age difference between French President Emmanuel Macron and his wife Brigitte?
Question 3, and this is what we call our listicle question. If only I knew what a listicle was. But the listicle question is, why was Olaf Falafel in the news this week?
Which alleged issue
Question
or issue?
4.
Oh, it's question 4. I didn't say question 2 either.
I know.
This is question 4. If you can't count, then this is probably not the
No, it
programme
probably
for
is
you.
the program for you because
Okay.
it's at that level.
Question 4. Which alleged issue did Donald Trump describe as niche or niche this week?
Nietzsche.
Nietzsche.
When he was feeling philosophical.
Very good.
Doesn't happen.
Yes.
Question 5. Football. Which 2 teams had a game described... See, I'm 50, I can't even see the screen anymore. Which 2 teams had a game decided by VAR, the video assistant referee, in the last minute for the second time in 4 months?
And finally, for those of you still counting, it's number 6. Which new version of Monopoly is causing a stir? The answer's after the drums.
Question 1 was, which territory voted to leave the European Union in 1982? David, any idea?
Voted to leave. Did they actually leave?
They left in 1985, yes. A sort of pre-Brexit.
So hang on a minute. So hang on a sec. Before we get on to who it was, it took them 3 years to leave.
Yes.
So what the UK is doing is not
Apparently they were arguing over the £2.50 payment to Europe to
leave.
To leave.
Gosh. Is it somewhere in Eastern Europe?
No, it's Eastern Europe didn't join too much later, so it's
Yeah.
it's a territory of a Scandinavian country
Ah, okay. So I've got it.
and the world's largest island.
Okay. So that would be the interestingly named, given that 80% of it is covered in ice, Greenland.
Yes, you'd think it would be called Iceland.
Iceland,
but somebody
yes.
had already stolen that name.
So yeah, what's the to do? Why are we talking about 1982?
So it's quite a good one, this one, because it actually crosses over 2 major stories, if not the 2 major stories in the news this week. Number 1, Greenland left the European Union, which is everything that's happening in Europe at the moment with Britain. It's complete obsession. If you go to Britain now, Brexit, 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 Brexit. So here you've got the original Brexit, or Grexit, as it was called.
Right.
But also, the President of the United States and second Messiah, Donald Trump, decided that he wanted to buy Greenland. Just turn up and buy a country or an island.
Is this Donald Trump wanting to buy Greenland, or is this the United States wanting to buy Greenland?
No, I think it was a personal. Donald Trump decided that Greenland would be good for his empire.
For his portfolio.
Yeah.
Along with Trump Towers.
So
golf courses.
he was going to Denmark, which currently owns Greenland, for an official visit to meet the Queen and the Prime Minister. And he asked, could he buy Greenland? And they said no. And because they said no, he cancelled his visit. And he wasn't too happy about it.
Now, I heard a Greenlandish MP who sits in Denmark talking about this, and she was actually interesting in what she was saying. Don't forget that Nuuk, the capital of Greenland, is actually closer.
You knew that, did you?
I'm
taking you with for the quiz next time.
Absolutely. The only reason I knew it was because I listened to a BBC interview with this politician speaking from Nuuk on it. But Nuuk is closer to Washington, D.C. than it is to Copenhagen. And she was saying that a lot of the Greenlandish the way they look at the world is through America, just because of geographical proximity. So she came up with some interesting notions on all of this. She said largely the Greenland people, though, were not overly into the idea. But I don't think that the Greenland people are particularly into the idea of Denmark controlling the country either. At the end of the day, which I assume is what you're about to tell us, it's all about resources.
Yeah. There is a large belief, and that the north of the planet, around the Arctic, and you can see it in Russia and Canada and places like that, that there is a lot of oil and natural gas to be found. And if you look at a place like Greenland, which, apart from Australia, but Australia is a continent, and Antarctica, Greenland is the largest island in the world. and there are very few people living there. So, it's seen as a cheap purchase and some way of getting hold of the world's resources. And if you're a Dr. Evil type character, this is something that you would want to buy.
Yeah, I think that's fair enough. I don't think we need to particularly throw out labels like Dr. Evil, but if you are the leader of your country, you are looking to expand the interests of your country. And if you think about what's going on right now between the United States and Russia, the United States and China and so on, it makes perfect sense that you would want access to those resources. Looking at Antarctica, all the way at the other end of the world, how many different countries that have got nothing to do with that area geographically own a piece of Antarctica? It's ridiculous.
It's split into about 4 or 5 territories.
I think
isn't
it could be 6, and I think the Danes might have an interest in Antarctica as well as others. It's utterly bizarre, and I can understand why the United States would want to make a bid if they're going to be able to expand their interest. And let's face it, if you compare what they're doing to what, say, for example, China is doing in a place like Sudan, China is not giving necessarily money to the Sudanese. It's largely just extracting natural resources because it's a strong power. At least the Americans are saying, hey, Denmark, let me give you some money for this.
So, I mean, the Chinese model is they lend people money. They go to these countries, lend them money, and then when they can't pay it back, they go, oh, what have you got? Oh, we'll take your oil. Whereas this one's slightly different. I know you said it's America wanting to buy it, but I'm still trying to find out whether it's America or Donald Trump. I still think that, he likes this cinema baddie thing, and he wants an island, because every James Bond villain has an island.
Does he have a cat?
There's something on his head that gets regularly.
And no, I was going to say something about pussycats, but I probably better not. I think we should probably move on to the next item.
On to question 2. What is the age difference between French President Emmanuel Macron and his wife Brigitte?
I'm so glad you asked that question. Brigitte Marie-Claude Trogne Macron.
Trogne.
Trogne. Oh, you don't pronounce
It's
the
a
G.
silent G.
Trog. She's a
Troglodyte.
troglodyte. Brigitte Trog Macron is a French school teacher whose residence, so Wikipedia tells me, is the Élysée Palace in France, because she happens to be married to Emmanuel Macron, who is the president of the French Republic.
Okay. So how old is President Macron?
41. Can you imagine? 41 years old and you're the president of one of the 6 most influential countries in the world.
No.
Okay.
At 41, I was certainly not doing that.
I know, absolutely. Okay, so he's 41, and Brigitte go for it.
At least 60, I would guess.
66.
No.
She's 66 years old. I'm not sure, just looking at various photographs, how much is naturally young looking and how much of it is the work of hairdressers and experts in plastic work. But she certainly looks a lot younger than her 66 years of age.
I remember when he came to power, there was a lot made of the story of how they met. I think they've only been together about 12 years, and she was previously married.
3 kids with her first husband.
Yeah, and this is one of the main, like you say, one of the main leaders of one of the powers of the world. One of the 2 or 3 most powerful people in the European Union.
You're not saying you've got a problem with him marrying a woman 25 years older than himself?
No. However, he married his school teacher.
Yes,
she was his
school
teacher.
teacher at the time.
No, she was. No, not when they got married.
25 years old.
I think she was a drama teacher, and as part of the drama lesson, maybe they did a fake marriage and ended up married.
Yeah.
No, but in Britain, I think they call that grooming. When a teacher falls in love with a pupil, they're struck off.
But is there evidence that this relationship began all that time ago?
Yes. Well, they certainly met at that time.
Right.
Whether they didn't get married, I think, until later. I think he was 30 when they got married. But I don't know if it's creepy. But it's strange to end up marrying a school teacher. I mean, did you ever have a crush on your teachers?
Yes, but I was way
At an
too.
all-boys
I was
school?
no, in my primary school, Miss Howarth, who was my teacher in class 2. But I was about 7 years older at the time, so I don't think it really counts.
Yeah, I mean, I had crushes on numerous teachers. I was at an all-boys school,
Right.
and yeah, no, we had an English teacher that all the boys used to sort of drool over.
Not that it matters, but male, female,
She was female.
right? Was it
But-
was it
but-
awkward to have? I was at an all boys school, but we only had male teachers. Was it awkward to have women teaching at a boys' school?
I think I think it was difficult for them. I mean, ironically, we had a teacher called Miss Denmark for maths, and at the same time, Miss Denmark won Miss World, so she was in for a hell of a lot of stick about that.
Right.
I
You
think
went to a comprehensive school, didn't you?
No, I went to I passed my 11 plus and went to a grammar school.
Did it become a
No,
comprehensive?
no,
while
it's
you
still
were-
it's
Oh,
still
stayed
one of
at
the
grammar
few
school.
remaining state
Look at
grammar
that.
schools in the UK.
Yeah.
I think the people that suffered most were the French assistants, because they were students, so
Right.
closer in age, especially if you were doing sort of French O-level on 16, 17,
Right.
and these people were 19. It was really, really tough for that.
Now, without absolutely not wanting to be sexist about this issue, this weekend, the Macrons will be strutting their stuff in Biarritz, which is an upscale resort in France, southwest France, because they're hosting the meeting of the G7. That's the leaders of the most powerful economic countries around the world. The First Lady of France wants to be very presentable, very, youthful, etc., especially given
Yeah.
all of the giggles that will be had by the other leaders attending because of that odd relationship. To what extent do you think that it's right that a woman has to try to appear to be younger, I guess, to send out positive signals to other people and also to feel good in herself? And to what extent do you go in trying to do that?
Well, I mean, I think she bucks the trend to some extent. If you look at the other leaders that are coming there, if you look at President Trump, he's on his third wife, and they tend to be hand-selected immigrants, ironically, that come to America. If you look at Boris Johnson, he is with his girlfriend, having left his wife, and she is a good 20 years younger than him, and ironically banned from America. For when he goes for a state visit, she can't get a visa because she's been to Somaliland or somewhere like that. So, do you know, I don't know if you never see Angela Merkel's husband. If there is a
I
husband.
don't know. I really don't know.
It's one of those things.
So you're saying she's bucking the trend?
She's very much out there. I mean, there are some presidents and prime ministers around the world who have their wife centre stage. I remember Bill Clinton, Hillary Clinton was there, and then obviously went on to become a senator and run for president. But if you look in England, Theresa May, who was there beforehand, her husband was very much in the background. You saw him when they went in, and you saw him when they left, and you saw him on the odd country walk in between. But in a way, it's incredible that there's so much time spent discussing this woman's age, and she's married to one of the most powerful leaders in the world.
Fair enough. Let's leave it there. Let's have a quick jingly drummy thing, and then we'll come back with question number 3, which I think is what did you call it?
The listicle.
The listicle. Yep, we'll be back with the listicle after this. And welcome back to the almost 30-minute quiz show with Mark and David. Question number 3 is our listicle. You'll get the idea of what a listicle is in a minute. Why was Olaf Falafel in the news this week, Mark?
Olaf Falafel describes himself as Sweden's 8th funniest comedian, but this year he won the Dave Funniest Joke of the Edinburgh Fringe with this one-liner. I keep randomly shouting out broccoli and cauliflower. I think I might have florets.
Which is funny. I think it's very funny.
I like it.
But there are people who have a problem with that.
Yeah,
joke.
there was a group that support people with Tourette's syndrome, which is a very unfortunate condition where you have tics that you can't control yourself and shout out random things. But actually, I hate to say this, there was a program called The Undateables on British television, which takes people who struggle to find dates and sets them up on a pub visit or something through a dating agency. And sadly, one of the funniest editions is usually the people with florets. Tourette's.
That is very funny.
Where I think one of the conditions of Tourette's. It's got to me, Olaf. One of the conditions of Tourette's is you shout out what's on your mind. So there are a lot of stresses and strains about going on a date, which you try and keep held in. The edition I saw, someone was late, and he just let the whole lot out the minute the woman arrived and called her all sorts of names, which is unfortunate, but sadly very funny. However, the Tourette's charity who complained about it this week wouldn't agree with me. Should we have a quick look at what came second, third, and
Yes.
the other nominated?
So this is a random list made up by, who is it?
Dave Television.
Dave TV came up with, so we've got the florets thing.
Yeah.
Then we've got the next 10 jokes. So you want me to go first?
Yeah.
Okay, one each. I haven't read these before, so forgive me if I laugh or don't. Someone stole my antidepressants. Whoever they are, I hope they're happy. That was from Richard Stott.
Milton Jones offered, "What's driving Brexit? From here, it looks like it's probably the Duke of Edinburgh."
A cowboy asked me if I could help him round up 18 cows. I said, yes, of course, that's 20 cows. That's Jake Lambert.
Ross Smith said, "A thesaurus is great. There's no other word for it."
That's quite clever, actually. Ross Smith, sleep is my favourite thing in the world. It's the reason I get up in the morning.
Adele Cliff said, "I accidentally booked myself onto an escapology course. I'm really struggling to get out of it."
Oh dear. Are these the best or the worst?
These are the best.
Okay. After learning 6 hours of basic semaphore, I was flagging, from Richard Pulsford. That was actually quite clever.
This is my favourite coming up next, from Mark Simmons. "To be or not to be a horse rider, that is equestrian."
Good Lord. And finally, from Ivo Graham. Ivo Graham's actually, I think, the only one of this lot that I've heard of. I've got an Eton-themed advent calendar where all the doors are opened for me by my dad's contacts. I know.
Yeah.
Let us know your favourite gag, one-liner, pun. You can do that by emailing us at almost30quiz@gmail.com.
My favourite was the winner a couple of years ago. I'm just going to get this one in.
I thought we'd finished.
Have we?
Oh, okay, go on, carry on.
My dad suggested I register for a donor card. He's a man after my own heart. Question 4. Which alleged issue did Donald Trump describe as niche this week?
Surprisingly enough, climate change. Now, some of you out there are going to groan, and some of you out there are going to say, you know what, we've really got to be talking seriously about climate change. The facts speak for themselves. But the point here was, as we mentioned before, there's the G7 meeting this week in Biarritz, and the two guys who are going to dominate, and it is males, who are going to dominate the headlines probably are Macron, because he's the host, and obviously Donald Trump, because he is Donald Trump. In the planning for this session, allegedly in a conversation between the two men themselves, when climate change was brought up, it was described by Donald Trump as being niche, or he probably said niche. For many of us, I think it's fair to say climate change is a very real, even palpable today, threat to the future of humankind. Others may disagree.
I think part of the problem is not so much the message about climate change. I think most sane, right-minded people understand that, you know, we have to look after the environment. We have to be careful not to pump out all the carbon dioxide into the environment. We have to be careful not to throw all our crap into the ocean. But it's the way that message comes across. And I think there's so much annoyance with that message. It's what gives credibility to climate change deniers.
So in other words, you're saying if people weren't so in-your-face politically correct about it, and it wasn't part of some sort of screaming left-wing lobby, it would be something that would be more accepted to the broader public.
Yeah, I mean, there's two ways to look at it. You have governments, and they come and tell you, we need to save the environment, therefore we're going to put a tax on X, Y, and Z. It's the number one way of adding tax to anybody out there, the workers, businesses. You have taxes on plastic straws, you have taxes on carbon emissions, you have taxes on the emissions from your car going into a city centre, traffic congestion. All of these things are a big problem, but what do governments do? They say the way to deal with it is to add more taxation. So if you're an average person on an average salary, you're getting clobbered every day with taxation. You start to look at alternative truths and say, if I believe the man who says there is no climate change, then I don't pay tax. And I think that's one of the big problems with the argument.
That's actually very, very smart. I never thought of you as being intelligent.
Yeah. The other one, have you seen this Swedish girl, Greta Thunberg?
The Swedish girl?
Yeah, she's about 15 or 16
she is a girl. Okay.
Going around lecturing the world.
Yes. I
Yeah.
know exactly who you mean, yes.
She's so frigging miserable. You know, if you want people to accept climate change, fucking smile, for God's sake.
Brilliant. Yeah, fair point. Now, one of the reasons that we're mentioning this, apart from just the classic niche moment from Trump, is what's going on in the Amazon. Now, we're only hearing about it now in all of the news because these fires are rampant. But this has been a problem for decades now, that the Amazon, which is the world's largest rainforest, is disappearing.
It's essentially the lungs of the earth.
The lungs of the earth, beautifully put. And what's happening apparently is, as it's being logged, as areas are being cut down, yes, they're being replaced with other trees. These trees that they are replacing them with apparently are not creating the same amount of liquid that's going into the atmosphere. They are much more likely to catch fire. And so the replacement is not like for like, it's not quality. And you know, the evidence of the depletion of rainforests and so on is there for everybody to see. So, you know, 2016 was the warmest year on record. The planet's average surface temperature has risen about 1.5 Fahrenheit or 0.9 degrees Celsius, you know, since the end of the 19th century. I mean, there are real problems out there. We know the glaciers are disappearing. We know the oceans are warming. And yes, you made a very, very strong case for why people find the deniers as an attractive option. But at the end of the day, we all, I would proffer, have a duty to consider when we're flying, how much we're flying, how many people we're taking in our cars. And there are certain simple things that we can do to help.
I tell you one thing we can do. If I'm head of marketing at Amazon, I would really think about renaming my Fire Stick at the moment, because it's a really bad name. Look, one last point for me. There's Britain are very lucky to have the royal family, if you ask me. I think they're great. And you've got Prince Harry, who, you know, gone beyond what you'd expect from a prince. He was a war hero, went out to Afghanistan. But
so the PR people tell us, yeah.
Well, you know, I believe he was there for 12 weeks. I'm sure he was very well protected. They didn't have him on the front line near a sniper. But he and his new wife have joined the set of people that come and talk to you. And there was a conference, I think, somewhere like Sicily last month, where you had all sorts of celebrities like them turning up in their private jets. I think there were over 100 private jets flown to this conference on climate change. And since then, they've taken, I think Prince Harry was saying, we're only going to have 2 children because we're worried about population growth. And since then, he's been on 4 holidays on a private jet. So it's that message coming from people. They have to be consistent with their message and possibly smile a little more. Greta, please. Question 5 was about football. Which 2 teams had a game decided by VAR, the video assistant referee, in the last minute for the second time in 4 months?
Well, the answer is Tottenham Hotspur of London. Tottenham. And Manchester City from Manchester. Funnily enough, Mark and I both happen to be into football and both are supporters of Manchester City. And it was Manchester City that ended up being on sort of the losing side of decisions by the new system that was introduced into the English Premier League. this season, the season is just a couple of weeks old. The idea is that major decisions, particularly in and around the penalty box leading up to goals, that those decisions will be reviewed by a couple of referees sitting in a video unit somewhere just outside London called Stockley Park, and
Heathrow Airport.
By Heathrow Airport, and they will whisper into the ear of the referee what should happen. In both cases, with regards to the games between Spurs and City, the referees ruled goals that were scored by Manchester City in more or less the last minute or 2 minutes of play, and everybody in the stadium thought that they were goals. The referee or the video referees decided that those goals were offside, which is an infringement in football, and those goals were ruled out, crucially meaning in the first game that Manchester City were knocked out of Europe's leading football competition, and in the second game, in which Manchester City had 31 shots compared to Tottenham's 3.
Although they did score 2 from those 3.
Yes, that Manchester City did not win, and the game ended 2-2. Anything you want to add on that?
Yeah, the whole purpose of VAR was to try and take controversy out of the game, that things would be clear, that when people were talking about football, we'd be talking about football, that managers would go and stand up there and say, we lost because the other side were better, not because the referee did X, Y, and Z. And the papers in the last 2 weeks since the Premier League season has happened all around Europe, all they're talking about is video assistant referees and decisions from video assistant referees. And I don't know whether it's because the system doesn't work, because when you look at it, most of the decisions were actually correct. But what it is that managers will always deflect away from the fact that their team is the second best team, and will look for something to blame. And beforehand it was the video, and now it's the video assistant referee. It's never, my team were not good enough to score enough goals. We had 31 shots and only 2 of them went in the net.
Yep. I couldn't agree more, but like everything else in life, there are going to be teething problems, and this first season in the English game, people are just going to have to get used to it. And you know, there are fans of Manchester City who are saying, we're going to tear up our membership, our season tickets to come and watch games. Nonsense. Of course they're not. They're just angry and venting in these first few weeks. It's a learning curve.
Yeah. I mean, for me, I think if it's managed properly, it's a good thing for football. Because it gets rid of excuses. I would love people to own up and say, my team just didn't play well enough this week. You know, we won because we scored more goals. We lost because we didn't put enough effort in. Not we lost because my shoulder was an inch offside and the referee didn't see that.
Correct. Play the game by the rules and adapt your method of play to those new rules, which certain teams like Manchester City need to learn to do. Last question on this, our first ever podcast.
Okay. And we're always going to try and finish off with a fun or bizarre news article.
So this is an interesting one. Mark, which new version of Monopoly is causing a stir?
Hasbro have introduced a new version of Monopoly called Monopoly Socialism.
Okay, which is a contradiction in terms.
Yes, especially seeing Monopoly was brought in as an anti-capitalist game in the 19th century in the first place. They've now decided to bring out a special socialist edition. Monopoly has so many special editions for every town, for every city, for every football club, every soccer club, you name it, there is a Monopoly edition. But this one has caused quite a stir in America. You've had Senator Ted Cruz tweet University protesting and tweeting another way. But there are some really interesting things. Have you seen the Monopoly socialism game?
No, tell me a little bit about it.
Okay.
And then I'll tell you about a game I have.
So, if you pass go, you no longer collect $200. You collect a $50 living wage. The pieces are all supposed to be very old style 1920s pieces. So you've got an old television, old telephones, typewriters, pocket watches. You can see where this is heading. Hasbro are just having a dig at socialism and saying it's outdated, outmoded, and you're going to starve. The chance cards, instead of talking about winning a beauty competition, you now win a vegan meatloaf or some tofu chip cookies in honor of Karl Marx's birthday, or treat yourself to some homemade granola. So a fair old dig at the millennials here. And one of the best ones of all, in the old days, all the fines and everything used to go into free parking and the winner took it all. Now it goes into a community fund that pays people that can't afford to buy houses, so it subsidizes their houses. And just with socialism, there's never enough money in there and the money runs out. So when anybody lands on free parking, there's nothing left in there.
I'd actually quite like to play that. Now, I have a surprise for you. I just went into...
Live on air?
Live on air. This is my toy... I went into my toy cupboard. Yes, we have a toy cupboard for grown-ups in this house.
Do I really want to go near that cupboard?
And I'm going to make all of the sound effects of opening a box. And this is a game called Anti-Monopoly, which I've had for about 20 years. And
at least 20.
At least 20 years. It's the game of small business competitors versus monopolists, a trading game that respects small business and competition. So it's not promoting socialism, but I thought something is very interesting. If I can very, very quickly find it, I'm going to read this out. I think the idea here in this game, if I remember, because I haven't played it for years, is you have both monopolists and small business types playing against each other to see who wins. So
well, the monopolist.
No,
you can save yourself 2 hours.
No, not at all. And
in the long term, they do.
In the long term, so interesting. It says the game versus reality, which is what I wanted to read out. In the real world, monopolists actually have been frenziedly accumulating land all over the country, except, of course, in cities where competitors do own a lot of property. In the game, monopolists achieve enough market power to monopolize the real estate of the whole country when they buy a second piece of land in another city of that country. Now, it sounds all very complicated, but it is very interesting, this idea, when this game was created a long time ago, 100 years ago, that there was the notion that there's still competition in the middle of towns, which, as we know, is largely disappearing.
As are the middle of most towns. If you
Exactly.
if you start to look, I mean, a lot of people say it's the internet. You know, there's no need to go to the high street anymore. But I think more than anything else, what's killing all of these shops is the high rents that they have to pay. If you go down a high street in a lot of countries now, there are tanning salons, there are food outlets,
Charity shops.
There's very little in the way of clothing retailers, shoe retailers. I remember when I was little, we had this little shoe shop that we used to go to, and it had a chain of 2 stores in 2 neighbouring towns, right. And that was it. You just can't imagine seeing that much anymore. So
you said to everybody that we're going to be finishing on a happy note.
Yeah.
You just depressed everybody listening to this. That's all we've got time for, unless you've got a pearl of wisdom or one of your jokes or...
the only thing I didn't mention was that the logo on Monopoly Socialism is "Winning is for capitalists."
There you go. Well, I imagine a lot of people would probably argue that they would like to be capitalists. Let us know your thoughts, capitalists or socialists. What are you? You can do that by emailing us at almost30quiz@gmail.com. Almost30quiz@gmail.com. Mark, it's been a pleasure.
It's been fun.
Let's see if we make it to edition 2.